Hey everyone, welcome back to iStart Insider, where we dive into the journeys of young, trailblazing innovators, creators, and changemakers. I'm Sonika.
And I'm Abhay. We will be your podcast host for today. Today's guests are people we're so excited to have on, Monika and Sonika Krishna. These twins are entrepreneurs, social advocates, and STEM enthusiasts in a dynamic duo of leadership and impact at Indiana State University.
Good afternoon, Monica and Sonika. Thank you so much for joining us, and we're so glad to have you on our podcast to learn about your unique experiences. How are you both doing today?
Doing well. How about you guys?
Great.
I'm doing great as well.
I'm also doing great.
Great. So you wanted to start off by discussing your impressive experiences at the Amplify Institute as business analyst interns. What experiences allowed you both to be a part of this internship, and what were your responsibilities at the Amplify Institute?
All right. So, what really prepared me for the Amplify Institute was a mix of leadership and analytical experiences I already had in high school, especially through robotics and the Ross Summer Business Academy. Those roles taught me how to handle projects, communicate ideas, and also work in teams with others. I was able to build on that kind of by working as a business analyst intern, as you mentioned. My main responsibility was researching AI bias in healthcare. Each week, I would analyze how algorithms had impacted patient outcomes, and then I would write deliverables that broke down these findings in a way that policymakers and government officials would be able to understand. Towards the end, I actually got to present my research directly to the founders of this YC startup, which was a really valuable experience because it taught me how to communicate complex ideas to decision makers and also gave me a glimpse into how quickly startups operate and how important it is to translate the technical findings that you get into clear and actionable insights. I think we were able to be a part of this internship because of the various skills we developed from our activities in high school, such as robotics, as Sonika mentioned, and some of the nonprofit work that we've done. These experiences taught us how to combine, as Sonika said, technical and leadership skills, which matched with what Amplify was looking for. And at the Institute, we focused on research surrounding AI governance and how technology connects with policy. And taking those findings, we translated them into presentations to give to non-technical audiences so they could easily understand. And I think something that was really cool about this opportunity was getting to meet the founders and present our findings to them as they could use those later on in their various projects going on the Institute. So that was really cool.
Yeah, definitely. That's very cool. I mean, I've been doing some personal research into how bias in AI is affecting fields like healthcare, as you mentioned. So that's really cool to see that you guys were a part of that. Speaking of experiences that prepares you for the Institute internship, preceding your internship at the Amplify Institute, you both were a part of the Harvard Ventures Tech Summer Program. So what exactly did you learn there about business that might have prepared you for your internship? And also, we heard that you interacted with key industry leaders. How was that?
So the Harvard Ventures Tech program was honestly really transformative for me because it introduced me to entrepreneurship in such a hands-on way. It wasn't just slide decks and just looking at information. I wasn't just reading about business models. I was actually applying the lean startup methodology that we learned about and learning about market validation to the actual internship. One of the best parts, I would say, of this program was being mentored by Harvard student entrepreneurs such as Caleb Klein, who really showed us kind of this scrappy side of starting something new. And we also got to meet with leaders like Mark Cuban and Lionel Snyder, who's the CEO of Bose, as well as many others. And that was really surreal, getting to connect with them and hearing directly from people who had scaled businesses or managed global companies. It kind of gave me a much bigger perspective on risk taking and innovation. Don't be scared to put your idea out there. It also pushed me to think about how businesses aren't just profit driven all the time. They're about adaptability and also creating a vision. I also came away with a lot of confidence, even at a young age, because I don't have a startup right now, but it really taught me a lot about the methodology that goes into creating a startup. And it also taught me that I could also be part of solving challenges that are currently faced in the business world. Yeah, to add on to what Sonika said, the Harvard Ventures program was really a crash course into entrepreneurship. And we learned about how to test ideas, evaluate markets, anything about startups, and really understand what makes startups successful, as majority of startups tend to fail within the first few months. Also, as she said, it wasn't just about the lectures or the slideshows. It was also about practicing our pitching and building our own concepts ourselves. A highlight of the program was getting to meet speakers like Mark Cuban and the CEOs of Etsy and Bose, and hearing from them made the business world feel much more real and approachable to incoming college students like us. And their stories about how they had to adapt and the resilience really inspired us to think bigger about our own projects and ideas.
That's amazing. Being part of DECA, I can kind of relate to all of these business and startup ideas. And having participated in DECA, I can see how much this can actually benefit you and benefit many people. Not everything you both did was related to business and finance. You co-founded Boxes of Belovedness to send sanitary kits to underserved communities. Now, what drove you both to do this, and what impact did the organization have on the communities you assisted, as well as yourselves?
So boxes of belovedness started because we kind of saw a very real issue around like resource inequality, both locally and globally. For me personally, what drove it was a belief that something as like basic school supplies or hygiene products, it shouldn't really be a privilege. We started small, but the impact was meaningful. We started with sending 50 boxes of supplies to a rural school in India. And it wasn't just about like giving them pencils or notebooks. It was also kind of giving them motivation for the students to keep pursuing their education and to not drop out. The sanitary kits that we created were donated to families at the Ronald McDonald House in Ann Arbor, and this kind of helped relieve one small but important financial burden for these families during a stressful time, as many of them had patients that were admitted at the University of Michigan Hospital. And personally, the project gave me like a perspective of how even like small actions can like ripple outwards, and you can grow a bigger impact. And also made me realize that business and nonprofit work don't have to necessarily be separate. Like management skills like budgeting, planning, and logistics, all of that can like directly help solve social issues. And I think that connection for me was one of the most like rewarding takeaways. To add on to what Sonika said, we really started Box of Alumnus because within our own family, our aunts in particular on my father's side, they only got to go to school till eighth grade because they didn't have enough money to afford things like school fees or even small things like pencils or pens. And from this, we saw that there were many people that didn't have consistent access to basic school supplies, hygiene, or sanitary products all around the world. And we wanted to do something that was actually like tangible to help as students, even as like high school students. We were able to organize donations and distribute kits both in Michigan and in India, which was meaningful because we got to connect both to our local communities in Michigan and our cultural communities as coming from India. For the people we served, I would say the kits provided essential relief for them, especially in hard times. And for us, it was a chance to learn about how to start an organization from the ground up. It really showed us that young people can create change in very real ways. And even me and my sister and a few of our friends could contribute to that change as well.
Wow, that's really heartfelt. You were talking about how a small ripple can have a big effect and how young people can make change. I think you guys both really showcased that versatility in your interests when you guys were social media coordinators for Teen Health Dell. You both exemplify these values. And what did you both learn about advocating for teenagers as social media coordinators? And how do you apply that to your other interests?
So at Teen Health Out, our role was basically to make like health education relatable and accessible for teenagers. So we both wrote weekly articles about issues like stress, nutrition, and healthy habits. And we basically helped translate research into posts that teens could actually engage with, such as on Instagram. And the biggest thing I learned was how important it is to like meet your audience where they are. Whether through Instagram stories or like blog posts, the goal was kind of to spark conversation and not just like broadcast information and just like the audience with that. And that skill translates to like business and leadership as well, because at the end of the day, whether you're marketing a product or like running a nonprofit, you kind of need to know how to connect with the audience in a way that resonates with them. It also gave me like practice into like building credibility because when you're sharing like health information, particularly like accuracy really matters. And that kind of responsibility kind of showed how I like create content in any space that I work with today. To add on, as Sonika mentioned, we worked on making health education more accessible and engaging for teenagers through social media posts. And our role was to create content for social media that simplified complex health topics into something teenagers could actually connect with. And they taught us a lot about communication and how to adapt to messages to fit different audiences. And we also saw how powerful digital platforms can be for like advocacy, in particular for issues associated to health and wellness. And those skills have carried over into everything else we do, whether it's like our nonprofit work, internships, or even robotics. Being able to share ideas clearly and creatively is useful everywhere, wherever you go, I would say.
That's great. I feel like that idea of the social media coordinators is pretty smart because these days a lot of teens are on the internet and getting the message out on the internet through social media or Instagram posts is a great way to like connect with them. And then the topics that you guys cover are like amazing because I feel like many teens these days are trying to go into these different emerging fields such as robotics. And speaking of robotics, I feel like robotics seems to be a key interest of you both. So what different roles did you both take on in robotics, and how does your dedication for robotics tie into your shared interests in business and finance?
So starting off with me in robotics, my journey actually started with marketing media group, and I basically helped design like team branding materials such as spiritware. I ran like social media accounts such as Instagram as well as LinkedIn, and I also helped shape kind of like how our team presented itself. But then over time, I moved into finance and sponsor relations, and I worked on that for 3 years. And that kind of became more of my favorite part. And I led a group of 12 students to manage like $100,000 budget. And we also worked on writing grant applications, and we also ensured that deliverables were met and that we were connecting with our sponsors throughout the season. And that experience was honestly kind of like running like a small company. It required like organization, financial accountability, and communication with external stakeholders such as sponsors and parents. And it ties perfectly to business and finance because it showed me how like crucial like resource management is, whether it's for a robotics team or a real world startup. And robotics also gave me confidence in leadership because I sometimes had to guide peers that were actually older than me. And I think that's a blend of like technical exposure and financial responsibility. It really helped me prepare for my future in business. To add on, I would say in robotics, we took on very different but roles that were complementary. One of us really focused on finance. My sister really focused on finance, like managing the team's budget and working with sponsors, while I really focused on handling the marketing outreach and the media side. The experience really showed us that robotics was, as my sister mentioned, also like running a small business. You need funding, branding, organization. And it really showed me that there's another side to robotics because technically a lot of people think of robotics just as being a STEM based field, but it showed that it's not really on the focus of just engineering skills, but also you get the chance to build up a lot of business skills as well. And it really tied into our interest for business because we could clearly see how branding was done, financial planning was done, and communication was done in kind of in like a small business type setting and how that affected our team's success. It also pushed us to become problem solvers and leaders, which prepared us for future things like internships and other projects that we worked on far into the future.
Yeah, definitely. I totally understand that. I used to do robotics a few years ago, and the idea that you can find leadership positions within robotics is really cool. You guys also had leadership positions as conference facilitators for Student Elevated Voices Conference. So, can you explain what the conference was and how was advocating for student voices related to your passions for business once again?
Okay, so Student Elevated Voice Conference was really about giving like students a platform to talk about issues that like directly impacted them, like education or racism, and then like the lack of resources as well as mental health. And as a conference facilitator, I got to work directly with students from all different school districts around Michigan. Some were from well-funded, some were from underfunded school districts, and I helped them guide conversations about their experiences. What struck me was how disparities in educations affect opportunities later on, including in business. Advocating for these voices taught me the importance of listening before leading. For me, that connects back to business because successful management isn't really just about like numbers, it's all about your audience as well as the people associated with the organization. And this experience really grounded me more with empathy because you can't just like create solutions kind of like without first understanding the lived realities of like others. It also made me appreciate how important it was for leaders to build equity into any system they're a part of.
To add on, I would say out of everything I've done throughout high school and as incoming freshman in college, I would say this was definitely an experience that was really powerful because you got to hear firsthand from students and how these educational disparities within school districts affected them on the daily because typically in like the news and stuff you hear from like government officials but you don't really hear from the individuals who are affected directly from these disparities. So that was something that was really powerful and I was really like pleased to lead discussions and let these people who tend to be subdued when it comes to talking about the disparities that affect them on a daily basis have the chance to speak. And I would say for the business connection, it really connects to business because running a conference required like things like communication planning and organizational skills. And those are the same ones that are used typically in professional settings. It also like reinforced our belief in making sure diverse voices are always included in decision-making processes. So this was something that was really powerful.
Yeah, that's really great. Speaking about business, it seems that you both had endless industry experience within high school itself. So you both served as finance interns at SparkedFlow. So what does SparkedFlow do, and what did you learn from another industry experience?
So Sparkflow basically focused on financial literacy, especially for our younger audiences. And then as a finance intern, I worked on creating social media content to break down financial concepts like budgeting, stock market basics, and saving strategies. I also collaborated with a team to design posts and blogs that reached over 1,000 plus followers. What I learned from Sparkflow was the importance of financial education at a young age. It gave me like professional experience working in a fast moving startup style environment where content needed to be creative, but it also needed to be accurate. And that experience deepened my interest in finance because I saw how empowering financial knowledge can be for people my age or any age. It also showed me how to like balance creativity with other responsibilities. And we basically had to make posts fun while also sharing information that was fact checked and practical. And that skill set that I learned here still carries on with me in every other project I've taken on so far.
Just to jump in, I would say as finance interns, our main tasks were like creating and reviewing content, while also at the same time simultaneously researching financial trends that were relevant to our audiences, which were teenagers and improving their financial literacy. The role was really like a balance between being accurate and being creative, so that information like stayed both correct and engaging to our audience. And we learned a lot about tailoring financial knowledge to different groups of people, and it also gave us another perspective on how finance can be applied beyond just business classes.
Yeah, that's amazing. I feel like when you mention your early experience in this spark flow, I feel like that's very important because in business classes in school, they just like don't go very deep into the materials, and then getting this exposure is very important for like building the confidence in the future, like you mentioned. Now, you also mentioned that you worked in team settings in this internship. And so I wanted to ask you, you guys are sisters, and in high school, you have both have been continually working together in a variety of settings. So how has working as sisters influenced your approach to teamwork, problem solving, and in your internships and projects?
So working with Monica, I think it's kind of been one of the best experiences because we like naturally balance each other out. We both have different strengths. For example, I like might focus more on like structure and planning as well as organization, while she kind of dives more on like creativity and like quick thinking. When we work together, those differences actually kind of make us stronger as a team because we can approach problems from like multiple angles and perspectives. It also made me more like adaptable in group settings. Since I'm so used to collaborating with Monica, I've learned how to like compromise, how to listen to others' ideas, and like also how to trust my like teammates fully. And that's a lesson I carry into like every internship or project I join. And beyond the professional side, it's also like fun. I think people can feel our energy and synergy like when we're working together.
Yeah, I would say working as sisters has been like one of our biggest strengths. We know each other's strengths and we also know each other's weaknesses. So, as Sonika mentioned, dividing the responsibilities and the tasks feels more natural. And we also have a lot of trust in one another, which makes it easier to take on risks and try new ideas. Of course, like any team, we sometimes disagree, but we've learned how to resolve conflicts quickly, which is something that's essential later on for places like the workplace, for example. And being siblings means we each hold each other accountable in ways that we know will push us to each do better. And overall, our partnership makes us more effective in every project we take on.
That's really sweet to hear. Speaking of lessons that you guys have taken away from your sisterhood and working together as sisters, what advice do you both have for young individuals hoping to pursue paths of entrepreneurship and business? And do you both have any takeaways from your experiences as high schoolers?
So some advice I have for like young entrepreneurs in general is like don't necessarily be scared to like put your idea out there. Like one thing I can just use is from like the Harvard Ventures Tech Summer Program. I remember there was like a lot of people who were like putting their ideas out there and they were really scared to share, but you don't really need to be scared to like share an idea or to start something new. I think for me personally, like the first step that you need to take when you put an idea out there is people are going to laugh at you, but you just have to have confidence all throughout the way and just like keep going, even though you're facing like difficulty. Yeah, that's a piece of advice I would give.
To add on, another piece of advice I would give is also relating to something that we learned in the Harvard Tech summer program is if you know of the company Canva that was started by Melanie Perkins in Australia. So she basically started off in a very like niche market in terms of digital marketing tools. And one of her biggest competitors was Adobe. And a lot of people doubted her because it was just she was just new to the market and no investors really believed in her, but she kept going. And now her company Canva has beaten Adobe. So that really goes to show that even if people doubt you or they don't believe in you, you should just keep going because you never know if you can make it somewhere. Like a lot of these big companies like Amazon, Microsoft, they wouldn't have made it as far as they are today if they didn't just keep believing in themselves and they didn't just keep going. And there wasn't a strong force backing them in the end, which was the founders themselves.
Yeah, that's some great advice. I heard this quote once, like, you miss 100% of the shots you don't take. So I feel like what you guys said kind of goes with that quote because if someone doesn't get their idea out there, then they're not going to be able to persevere and be determined to actually make that idea a reality. Well, Monica and Sonika, thank you so much for being part of our podcast. We really enjoyed having you on this podcast, and I think our viewers learned a lot from you both. And we want to wish you the best of luck on your future endeavors. For our listeners, stay tuned for our next episode. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you
Thank you so much.